They think a piece of paper can chain a whole continent. They call it a warrant. We call it what it is, the last trick of a dying empire. For centuries, Africa has been shackled by chains of iron, then by chains of law, and now by chains of ink. But today, one soldier, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, has torn the mask off their game. What does it mean when Interpol, France, America, and Brussels all tremble at the voice of a single African leader? What does it reveal when the powerful reach for bureaucracy because they fear the courage of farmers, workers, and youth? They are not hunting one man, they are trying to stop a generation. This is not about justice. It is about fear. Fear of gold that will no longer be stolen, uranium that will no longer light foreign homes, oil that will no longer fuel foreign wars. Fear of an Africa that finally says, no more. The night was silent, but Burkina Faso was trembling. Captain Ibrahim Traoré did not sleep. He knew the papers had arrived, an Interpol warrant. They called it, but he called it what it really was. A weapon aimed at the heart of a continent. The world thinks a piece of paper can control millions, silence generations, make Africa bow. They are wrong. Africa does not bow. Africa has never bowed. And tonight, one man would remind them of that truth. He stood by the window of the presidential residence in Ouagadougou, staring at the red earth below, feeling the weight of ancestors pressing against his chest. The faces of Lumumba, Sankara, Mandela, and Nkrumah flickered in his mind. They had been labeled dangerous, criminal, a threat, and now, so was he. Yet fear did not grip him. Only fire, only iron, only resolve. He remembered the whispers of history, how foreign powers had shipped Africans across oceans, how they had drawn borders with bayonets, how they had stolen gold, uranium, and oil. They thought that one man could be silenced with a warrant. They thought wrong. Outside, the city slept, unaware of the storm brewing within its walls. Intelligence reports had tracked movements, whispered plans, and suspicious transfers. Former officers in exile, some loyal to foreign interests, some bitter from lost power, were plotting. Their goal was not leadership. It was chaos. It was to make Burkina Faso ungovernable, to invite outsiders to step in under the guise of order. But they underestimated the vigilance of those who stood behind Traoré, the youth, the workers, the farmers, the awakened citizens who refused to kneel. They had learned from history. They had learned from the blood spilled for freedom. He paced the floor, reviewing the maps and intercepted messages again. Every route, every safe house, every contact had been noted. If they thought secrecy would protect them, they were mistaken. The rebellion of silence, the plotting from afar, would fail against clarity and courage. Yet, the tension tightened like a drum. One misstep, one delayed order, one whisper in the wrong ear could change everything. The warrant was more than ink. It was a message. It was intimidation. It was the audacity of empires, frightened by the idea that Africa might finally reclaim its wealth, its dignity. In destiny, Traoré's phone buzzed a coded alert. Someone had been traced near the northern border. A convoy of suspicious vehicles, registered to a former colonel who had disappeared 2 years prior, was moving under the cover of night. If they reached the city, chaos would erupt. But he would not allow it. Not tonight. Not ever. He called his most trusted lieutenants. Orders were precise, sharp, unyielding. Every loyal soldier, every watcher in the shadows, every citizen who had pledged allegiance to their land was ready. He turned to his team, gathered around a single lamp, faces lit with determination. They think a warrant can stop us," he said, voice low, but firm. "But we are millions strong. We are awake, and we will not bow. They can promise exile. They can whisper death, but they cannot break the will of Africa." Every nod, every glance reinforced the unspoken understanding. This was bigger than one man. This was the soul of a continent. As the night deepened, he walked through the residence, touching the walls, imagining the stories of those who had walked before him, those who had fought for freedom, those who had fallen. The wind carried their whispers, mixed with the scent of dust and firewood, telling him that the people were watching, ready, and somewhere, far beyond the borders of Burkina Faso, the powers that thought they controlled Africa were stirring, unprepared for the storm their own fear had provoked. He returned to the window, looking at the city lights like sparks of hope. The warrant was meant to silence him. Instead, it ignited a fire. The first step had to be swift, the first strike precise. Tonight would test loyalty, courage, and the unbreakable spirit of a people who had been underestimated for too long. Every heartbeat was a drum of warning, every breath. A promesa, the night, was alive with anticipation. Traore whispered to himself, a prayer and a declaration at once. We will not kneel. We will not sell our land. We will not betray our ancestors. Africa will rise. And as the first stars faded into dawn, the city braced itself. This night, history would remember. The storm had begun. The sun had not yet risen over Ouagadougou, but the city was already alert. Captain Ibrahim Traoré moved through the corridors of power with precision, every step measured, every glance sharp. Intelligence reports were streaming in. The former colonel, the one who had vanished into exile 2 years ago, was not acting alone. Networks of ex-officers, foreign sympathizers, and shadow operators were aligning quietly, like predators circling a wounded lion. They believed stealth and distance would protect them. They were wrong. Traoré knew their moves before they happened. He had studied every route, every communication, every loyalist who might waver. The warrant was a signal, but it had also been a warning that Africans were watching, learning, preparing. The emboldened youth, the farmers guarding their land, the workers protecting industry, all waited for a single command. Tonight, they would act. A coded message arrived from the northern border. A convoy of armed vehicles was advancing under the cover of early morning shadows. The former colonel had coordinated through encrypted channels, using safe houses across Burkina Faso and beyond. The plan was elegant, ruthless, precise, designed to create confusion, disrupt command, and force outside intervention. But Traoré's intelligence network was faster, smarter, relentless. He gathered his inner circle, eyes burning with determination. They think we are divided, he said, voice low but electric. They believe whispers and exile can weaken us. They are counting on fear. But Africa does not fear. We do not kneel. We do not obey threats. We do not surrender our future to ink or foreign hands. Each officer understood. Failure was not an option. The nation was not a pawn. It was a living, breathing force ready to strike back. Orders went out. Checkpoints reinforced. Loyal units positioned strategically. Signals from farmers in the northern villages confirmed readiness. The former colonel's plan relied on exploiting hesitation, and there would be none. The streets remained calm, but the tension was palpable, heavy enough to choke the air. One wrong move, one moment of delay, and the city could descend into chaos. Traoré walked alone for a moment, listening to the wind stir the acacia trees outside. He thought of the millions who had suffered under foreign domination, whose labor built empires they never owned. He thought, of Lumumba, Sankara, Mandela, and Nkrumah. Their courage, a torch he now carried. This was not about vengeance. It was about reclaiming dignity, asserting sovereignty, and sending a message that Africa would not be bullied by paper, stumps, or armies stationed thousands of miles away. The convoy approached the outskirts. Sensors and scouts relayed positions. Every loyalist was in place, every angle covered. The former colonel expected surprise. He would find resistance, coordination, and determination instead. The battle would not be fought with global headlines or international decrees. It would be fought silently, decisively, with the discipline of those who refused to bow. And then came the moment of confrontation. A scout intercepted the lead vehicle, voices shouted, radios crackled. The former colonel's forces were caught off guard. They had assumed Africa's leaders would hesitate. They had assumed fear would fracture, resolve. They had assumed wrong. Soldiers loyal, though Traore moved swiftly, blocking routes, securing crossings, neutralizing threats without bloodshed. But with unmistakable authority, Traore received confirmation on his secure line. Every element of the plot was contained. The northern approach secured the city safe. Yet the victory was not celebrated. It was acknowledged quietly, a nod, a glance, a shared understanding that this was only the beginning, and the empire that issued the warrant thought it could intimidate a single man. Instead, it had revealed its own fragility. Africa was awake, and now the world could see it. As dawn broke over the red soil of Burkina Faso, Captain Ibrahim Traoré looked out over the city. His jaw was set. His eyes were fierce. The warrant had failed. The conspirators had been contained. And yet, somewhere beyond the borders, empires stirred, unprepared for the fire they had awakened. One thing was certain. Africa would not kneel. Africa would rise. The first assault had been stopped, but the war for Africa's destiny had only just begun. By midday, the streets of Ouagadougou were stirring, but not with fear. Captain Ibrahim Traoré watched from his office as citizens moved with purpose. Eyes bright, hands steady. The warrant had been announced worldwide, but it was not met with submission. It was met with resolve. The youth of Africa, the farmers guarding the lands, the workers defending industry, all felt the pulse of a continent refusing to bow. They want to scare us, Traoré said, voice firm. Addressing his inner circle, they think threats, whispers, and red stamps can fracture our unity, but they are wrong. Africa has learned, Africa remembers, and Africa rises today because we choose courage over compliance. Messages from villages arrived. Farmers coordinating the protection of their crops, engineers reinforcing local infrastructure, students organizing networks to spread information everywhere. The same story, people were refusing to be intimidated. They shared one thought: when it is resolve, no foreign paper could dictate the destiny of African hands, African minds, African soil. Traoré knew that symbolism mattered as much as strategy. The people needed to see their own power, their own agency. He moved through the city, not as a commander issuing orders, but as a witness to history unfolding. Children waved, elders nodded, laborers paused in the sun to acknowledge his presence. In every gesture, there was a silent promise. Africa would not surrender. Africa would not kneel. And in the shadows, networks of ex-officers and foreign sympathizers were faltering. The youth had risen faster than they anticipated. Messages meant to sow doubt now carried only confusion for the conspirators. Africa's own systems, long overlooked, underestimated, were proving stronger than distant empires. The very cities, the roads, the markets, had become tools of resistance, channels of resilience, arteries of defiance. Traore convened a council of community leaders. "This is bigger than one man," he said. "We are a continent of people. Awake, the warrant, the threats. They exist only to remind us of what we have always known, that our destiny is ours to claim." The council nodded. Strategies were formed not for conquest, but for protection, not for aggression, but for survival and self-determination. And yet, the moment of challenge had not passed. Whispers of international pressure reached the city, letters from embassies, threats from organizations that the same forces that had tried to intimidate one man now tried to influence an entire population. The people were ready. They met these signals with silence, planning, and quiet action. Every village, every factory, every neighborhood became a fortress of collective will as the sun dipped low, painting the red soil with gold. Traore addressed the gathering in the main square. His words were simple, sharp, and electric. "We are millions. They are paper, stumps, and fear. Our unity is stronger than their threats. Our children will inherit dignity, not debt. Our land will feed us, not empires. Our gold, our uranium, our oil, and our future, they belong to Africa. We will not kneel. We will rise." The crowd erupted in quiet but undeniable affirmation. Chants rose, hands lifted, hearts swelled. The message was clear to every foreign observer. A continent, once divided, once subdued, was awake, aware, and unbreakable. Africa was no longer waiting for permission. Africa was acting. And somewhere beyond the borders, powers that believed they could intimidate a single man realized their miscalculation. A generation had reason, and a continent's will could not be caged by ink or threats. Captain Ibrahim Traoré knew the journey was far from over. The battle for Africa's destiny had entered a new phase, and the people, united, would carry it forward, unstoppable. Tonight, Africa did not kneel. Tonight, Africa learned the strength of its own voice. The evening settled over Ouagadougou, but the city was far from calm. Captain Ibrahim Traoré stood in the shadowed hall of the presidential palace, eyes fixed on the horizon. The warrant had failed to intimidate the people, but it had sent a message to those who still bent their knees before foreign powers. The era of puppets, he knew, was ending. He called a meeting of regional leaders, governors, ministers, and influential elders gathered in the grand room, their faces a mixture of reverence and unease. Traore did not mince words. "You have seen what a single mandate can do," he said, voice low, but cutting. "They think that obedience will protect you. They think that submission will safeguard your positions. It will not. Every decree, every sanction, every whisper of exile is meant to divide, to frighten, to control. Do you understand? Africa cannot be led by fear." Some leaders shifted uncomfortably. They had spent years negotiating survival under the shadow of external influence. Traoré's words pierced through that caution like fire through dry brush. "You may sit in your offices signing contracts written abroad," he continued, "but history will remember who stood and who bowed. If you bow, you betray your people. If you hesitate, you invite chaos. Africa is watching. Africa remembers." Outside, the wind carried the sounds of the city children playing, markets bustling, elders walking quietly in the dimming light. Every sound was a reminder that Africa's strength was not in paper or authority alone. It was in its people, awake, alert, and united, and that unity could not be intimidated, could not be bribed, could not be caged. Traoré's phone buzzed with urgent messages from the northern and eastern borders. Former officers loyal to foreign interests had regrouped, attempting to test the vigilance of local defenses. He studied the reports. Eyes sharp, mind calculating. He would not allow them to succeed. The warrant, the threats, the whispers from Paris, Washington, and Brussels. They were illusions of power, real power. He knew was earned through courage, clarity, and the loyalty of a united continent. He addressed the gathered leaders again. "Look around you," he said. "These streets, these fields, these communities, they do not kneel. They do not compromise. They protect what is theirs. If you choose fear over duty, you will fail them. If you choose compromise over courage, you will fail history itself." Captain Ibrahim, latest news is not about me alone. It is about every African who refuses to sell a nation's veins for scraps. We stand together, or we fall divided. The leaders listened, some in awe, some in silent resistance. Traoré did not soften his message. He wanted it to sink into the marrow of their bones. Foreign powers will always seek to manipulate, to control, to steal. They will smile, while empires crumble at their feet. Yet they will send papers, signatures, and forms to try to convince you that compliance is safety. It is not. Safety comes from courage. Safety comes from unity. Safety comes from the refusal to bow. As night deepened, the city lights flickered against the red earth. Soldiers patrolled. Farmers returned home. Workers finished their tasks. And the youth prepared for the next day's vigilance. Everywhere, the same rhythm. Watchfulness, preparation, determination. Traore knew the message had reached its mark. Leaders could no longer claim ignorance. The era of obedience was over. Africa would be led by those who dared, by those who stood tall, by those who would not be bought. And in the quiet of his office, Traore reflected, the warrant was a challenge. The foreign powers believed it would fracture Africa. Instead, it revealed the courage, the clarity, and the unbreakable will of a continent. The warning had been delivered. The choice lay before them. Bow and vanish into history, or rise and claim their destiny. Tonight, Africa had spoken. Captain Ibrahim Traoré had delivered the message. The leaders had heard it. The world beyond the borders had felt it, and the fire of defiance would burn brighter with every passing hour. The empire thought it held power. Africa knew the truth. The time for fear was over. Morning broke over Burkina Faso with a crimson sky, a reminder that Africa was alive, awake, and ready. Captain Ibrahim Traoré walked among the people, not as a distant leader, but as one of them. The youth had gathered, hands raised in solidarity, eyes bright with purpose. Farmers tended their lands with renewed vigor. Workers patrolled factories and industries, ensuring every corner was protected. The warrant had failed to intimidate. It had awakened. They think they can stop us with threats and stamps, Traoré said, addressing a crowd in the central square. They are wrong. Africa's power lies not in ink or papers, but in its people awake, united, determined. Our gold, our uranium, our oil, our land. They belong to us. And we will not kneel. The crowd erupted in affirmation, voices echoing across the city. A chorus of resistance and hope. Messages flowed from across the nation. Villages reported coordinated actions. Canals secured, roads protected, communications reinforced. Students organized networks to spread information. Each report reinforced the same truth. Africa's people were no longer passive. They were participants in a movement that could not be silenced. Every hand, every voice, Every heartbeat contributed to a rising tide that foreign powers could not contain. Traore met with local leaders and youth coordinators. Strategies were discussed not for conquest, but for protection and growth. The youth were empowered, the farmers vigilant, the workers disciplined. He reminded them, "This is bigger than any one of us." Captain Ibrahim. Latest news is about every African who refuses to sell their nation's veins for scraps. We rise together, or we fall divided. Nods and murmurs of agreement filled the room. Unity was no longer optional, it was survival. Throughout the day, the city became a living emblem of Africa's awakening. Murals appeared, depicting Lumumba, Sankara, Mandela, and Nkrumah, and the faces of ordinary citizens who had refused to bow. Markets thrived with activity. Schools ran programs teaching history and self-determination. Every corner, every street, every village became a testament to Africa, reclaiming its narrative. And yet, challenges persisted. Whispers of foreign plots reached the city. Attempts to destabilize regions, to sow fear, to manipulate leaders. But the youth, informed and united, countered these moves with vigilance. Every village, every neighborhood became a bastion of resolve. Africa's power was not just in weapons or offices, it was in knowledge, coordination, and unwavering courage. As dusk fell, Traore addressed the nation through secure channels. Our destiny is ours to claim. If I fall, another will rise in my place. If they threaten, we resist. If they try to divide, we unite. Burkina Faso. Latest news is not a story of fear. It is a story of awakening. This is the dawn of a new Africa, a continent that will own its resources, protect its people, and build its future. The people listened, hearts swelling with pride, hands clenched in determination. Africa's youth had risen, the farmers had risen, the workers had risen, and they were not alone. The spirit of generations past flowed through them, guiding every action, every decision, every stand. The continent was no longer waiting for permission. It was acting boldly, unflinchingly, and united. And somewhere beyond the borders, empires trembled. They had underestimated the strength of Africa's people, the power of its youth, the resolve of its citizens, the warrant, the threats, the whispers they had failed. Africa was awake, and it would not be silenced. Tonight, as stars reflected off the red earth, Captain Ibrahim Traoré stood with the people, looking toward a future claimed by courage, defended by unity, and illuminated by hope. Africa would rise. Africa could not be stopped, and the world would watch as the new generation carried the continent forward, unbowed, unstoppable, and free. The night sky hung heavy over Ouagadougou. Stars scattered like sparks of defiance across the dark canvas. Captain Ibrahim Traoré stood at the highest balcony of the presidential palace, gazing at the city below. Every light, every shadow, every street carried the heartbeat of a continent awake. The warrant, the threats, the whispers from distant capitals, none could shake the resolve of a people who had already claimed their destiny. Look at what they fear, Traoré murmured to himself, voice steady, full of iron. They fear unity, they fear strength, they fear a continent that refuses to bow, refuses to sell its gold, its uranium, its oil, its land. They fear Africa awake. Throughout the nation, messages of defiance poured in. The villages reinforced their borders. Farmers coordinated harvests. Engineers secured infrastructure. Youth networks spread information and vigilance. Captain Ibrahim. Latest news circulated with pride. The continent was not waiting, not trembling, not bowing. It was rising. The people were no longer subjects of distant empires. They were masters of their own fate. Traore convened a final council of national leaders and community coordinators. The room was silent, tension thick, yet the air vibrated with determination. "This is the moment," he said, voice carrying the weight of generations. "Foreign powers will test us again. They will attempt to divide, to coerce, to manipulate, but remember this, their power is fragile. Our unity is iron. Our courage is unbreakable." Burkina Faso. Latest news is a lesson for all of Africa. We will not kneel. We will not compromise. We will defend our people, our land, our future, by every means available. Outside, the people gathered, sensing the urgency, feeling the collective pulse of history. They had learned from the past, from Lumumba, Sankara, Mandela, and Nkrumah, that courage required action and freedom demanded sacrifice. They chanted quietly, not in fear, but in defiance, in hope, in love for their land. Africa was no longer waiting for permission. Africa was acting. Traore looked out at the red earth stretching to the horizon. Every village, every city, every border was alive with determination. The warrant, the decrees, the threats from Paris, Washington, Brussels, all were revealed as illusions. Africa's true power lay in its people, awake and united, ready to defend their dignity and resources. The continent had taken its first decisive steps, but the journey was far from over. He raised his hand to the sky, a gesture of promise and defiance. "We are millions. They are papers, stumps, and empty threats. Our people will guide Africa. Our hands will build Africa. Our hearts will defend Africa. No empire, no warrant, no foreign power can take this from us. We rise. Vendura, we reclaim." And in the quiet moments before dawn, a signal reached him, an alert from the southern border. A foreign-backed convoy was attempting to infiltrate. The people were ready. The soldiers were ready. And Captain Ibrahim Traoré smiled, knowing that Africa's spirit, once underestimated, was now unstoppable. The warrant was meant to intimidate. One man, it had awakened a continent. The empire that thought it controlled Africa now faced a reality they could neither ignore nor contain. Africa would rise. Africa would reclaim its destiny. Africa could not be chained. And as the first light of dawn painted the red earth gold, Captain Ibrahim Traoré turned to his people and whispered a promise to history. "We will not bow. We will not break. We will not surrender. Africa is ours, and nothing will ever take that from us." The storm had begun, and the world would watch as a continent refused to kneel,